Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about A Day and a Half. A Day and a Half is a Swedish dramatic thriller that tells the story of Artan, a man who is eager to reunite with his infant daughter. In an act of desperation, he rushes to the hospital where his estranged wife works at, and kidnaps her, but not before alerting the police to the incident. One of the police officers named Lucas is able to get inside the hospital and negotiate with Artan to keep the situation as calm as possible. His involvement eventually sets things in motion, as the group travels across Sweden in a tense hostage situation that could end in disaster. I always like when thrillers employ more dramatic stakes and themes to their stories, and this movie is a good example of that kind of genre combination. Its story can be repetitive, and there are some other issues with its presentation, but it's still a gripping slow burn thriller with meaningful social themes behind it. The main character, Artan, is an unusual protagonist in that he's not exactly someone the audience should be rooting for, and yet the filmmakers did a surprisingly effective job at making him more sympathetic. Obviously his actions are wrong, and he's never glorified for them, but I still appreciated that the movie never made him out to be a total psychopath. He's simply an honest immigrant citizen of Sweden who's reacted badly to his circumstances. He gradually reveals more details about his personal life as the situation progresses, which does a good job at showing the trust he slowly builds with the police, making his motives more believable, and keeping the audience engaged to see what more will be revealed later on. A similar arc occurs with the police officer Lucas, who's basically the liaison between Artan and the rest of the police force. Like with Artan, he has his own family situation that affects him, though he approaches it from a much more calm and mature position, and this gives him the perfect level of both relatability and conflict to bounce off from with Artan. I like how he acted as the voice of reason and leader within the group. Anytime a conflict comes up, either through Artan's paranoia or his wife's escalations, Lucas takes control of the situation and finds a way to defuse it, and his resourcefulness made the movie even more interesting as events proceeded. These two characters are done well, but Artan's wife Louise was a bit more disappointing by comparison. It's not that the performance is bad, as her actress does a great job at showing the emotional distress of her being kidnapped, but her character lacks the depth needed to put her on par with the others. Her relationship with Artan is fleshed out over time, and it's nice to learn what exactly happened between them, but it all feels rushed in execution. Louise has her own struggles similar to Artan, this time regarding mental health, but it seems to come out of nowhere and has no build-up leading to it. It just feels awkward compared to how info is slowly drip-fed from both Artan and Lucas's perspectives. Her side of the story is still valuable and necessary for what happens later in the movie, but it doesn't feel as impactful compared to the other two. The movie is at its best once it engages in the slow burn tension of the journey the characters undertake. The opening at the hospital is fairly tense and good at setting the stage for what happens later, but once Lucas secures a car for the group and they take off, that's when things really get intriguing, as they engage in several twists and turns, while Artan and Lucas both try to get what they want. It relies more on genuine suspense as opposed to any kind of action set piece, which for this story is more appropriate because of how delicate the situation is. It becomes increasingly more nerve-wracking the longer the group's trip goes on, as characters become more tired, hungry, and desperate to bring things to an end, but on their terms. This plays out in two ways. The first is when the trio just start getting going and Artan's hostility toward Lucas is at its peak, and the second occurs over time, as the trust between Artan and the others starts to build to a point where emotions affect his judgment, and it's fascinating to see this kind of emotional conflict play out. It reminded me a lot of the British movie Lock, with how it's mostly set in one place, that place being the car, and a whole cavalcade of events ensue from that one place. It's awesome to see the movie do so much with so little, though that doesn't mean it doesn't occasionally shake things up. Despite the group being stuck together, the movie takes advantage of a variety of locations to add more tension. Not only do the landscape shots of Sweden's rural countryside make things more foreboding, but normal things like stopping at a gas station or visiting Louise's family become exercises of suspense, as everything is done under the watchful eye of the police. The atmosphere is consistently tense right from the beginning and only gets more so from there. Everything from Artan's paranoid mannerisms to the constant police chatter on the radio make it seem like something could go wrong at any minute, and for a while, it's excellent with how persistent it is. Eventually though, the tension starts to lose steam. It becomes more repetitive with how the group always goes from one place to another, and the cops just follow them around without doing anything else. Even with the dramatic stakes that are added later on with Artan and Louise's daughter, it still feels monotonous. This does make sense to a certain extent, as it's supposed to represent how exhausted the characters are from traveling for so long and under so much duress. But even with this in mind, and as much as I enjoy the character development that occurs later on, it still becomes more boring and monotonous. This might also seem like a bit of a nitpick, but I was distracted by little changes in the cinematography here and there that change focus to the perspective of security cameras. It may be because this movie is based on true events and it's trying to add a sense of realism to the story, but I felt it already did a good job of that just with its tension alone, and I found these perspective changes to be more distracting than anything else. This being said, I appreciated the effort the filmmakers made to add social commentary behind this movie's story. It explores different themes from xenophobia to mental health to marriage, and all of them range from being competent to excellent in observation, while tying in well with each character's arcs. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of this movie, however, is how different everyone seems to be, and yet they're all connected by the simple fact that they've all made mistakes in their lives. Each of them is dealing with their own kind of baggage, and while some react to it more harshly than others, it shows how at the end of the day, everyone is still human and trying to get by. It's a basic but effective way of making the characters that much more relatable. Overall, A Day and a Half is an enjoyable dramatic thriller that succeeds in telling a suspenseful story with dramatic flair. If you like slow burn thrillers and want to see one that has more character development involved, you'd enjoy checking this out. While it's occasionally iffy in pacing and characterization, the tense atmosphere and dramatic elements of its story make it more riveting to experience. It's not easy to condense a day and a half into an hour and a half, but they sure succeeded in this case. What did you think about this movie? Did it do a good job at keeping you in suspense, or were you bored by it instead? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of A Day and a Half. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Dutch romantic comedy, Happy Ending. Bye bye!